In the far reaches of rural Savannah, there's a house older than the land it stands on, and it comes with rules. Simple rules. Strange rules. Rules you must follow if you want to see the sunrise. I've hunted spirits in asylums, walked through graveyards at midnight, and faced things that don't belong in this world, but nothing prepared me for the Lattice House. Every night, the rules keep me alive. Every night, the house finds new ways to make me break them. And now, something inside has stopped waiting, because the attic door is open, and it knows my name. Welcome. I'm Dr. Snooze. I hunt what you hear when the world falls quiet. Out here in the forgotten corners of Savannah, shadows don't just move, they wait. Every creak, every whisper, every rule you break brings you closer to the thing that's been watching you since you pressed play. Stay alert, stay awake, because the moment you drift off, that's when it finds you. The old truck rattled down the dirt road, its headlights slicing through the humid darkness of rural Savannah. Spanish moss hung from the oaks like tired ghosts swaying in the wind. I had been to haunted places before. Abandoned hospitals, creaking Victorian mansions, even Civil War battlefields. But there was something about this stretch of Georgia that settled into my bones differently. It was heavy, not in the way of fear, but in the way of a warning. I've been a ghost hunter for 12 years. Not the TV kind, with staged jump scares and too much night vision. I work privately for people who don't want attention drawn to their problem. And yes, ghosts are real. So are other things. My job isn't about proving it to skeptics. My job is to keep people alive. When I first got the call for this job, the voice on the other end was shaky but deliberate. "You'll come here," the man said, "but you follow the rules, or you'll never make it back out." That wasn't the first time a client had opened with a threat disguised as advice. Usually, I chalk it up to superstition or desperation. But this man didn't sound desperate. He sounded resigned. The address he gave me wasn't on any GPS. I had to cross a rusting bridge over a black, stagnant river, the kind where the air gets thicker as you pass over it. The truck's wheels crunched gravel until I reached a long dirt drive that wound into a cluster of massive oaks. There was a house, 3 stories tall, white paint peeling like sunburned skin, and dark windows that reflected nothing. A man stepped out from the porch shadows, tall, thin, with skin the color of old parchment, wearing a white shirt tucked into slacks like he was ready for Sunday service. "You're Whitman?" he asked. "That's me," I replied, grabbing my gear bag. "You called about an infestation?" He didn't smile. "This ain't an infestation. It's a feeding ground." The words settled in my chest uncomfortably. Inside, the air was cooler but smelled faintly of mildew and something sweet, rotting sweet like fruit left too long in a closed pantry. The walls were lined with faded floral wallpaper, and the hardwood floor groaned under every step. "My name's Franklin," the man said, motioning for me to follow. "This house, it's been in my family for 6 generations. Folks used to call it the Lattice House because of the way the vines grew up around the porch. They stopped calling it anything after the disappearances." I glanced at him. "Disappearances? 6 people in 20 years. 2 of them were hunters like you." That last part tightened my grip on my bag. "And you think whatever's in here is still active?" "I know it is," Franklin said, "and that's why you're going to need these." He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it and found a list written in spidery cursive. 1. Never be in the front parlor after midnight. 2. If you hear someone whisper your name, do not respond. 3. Keep every mirror in the house covered, no exceptions. 4. Do not step outside between 3:12 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. 5. If you smell gardenias, leave the floor you're on immediately. 6. Never, under any circumstances, look into the attic. "This a joke?" I asked, reading it twice. "You'll live longer if you treat it like it isn't," Franklin said flatly. "I've worked cases with strange conditions before, like bringing milk to a spirit or burning cedar wood at dusk, but something about these rules felt deliberate, precise, like each one had been paid for in blood." I spent the rest of the evening setting up my equipment, EMF meters, voice recorders, thermal cameras. The sun dropped below the trees, and the entire property seemed to inhale. The crickets went quiet. At 11:43 p.m., I was in the hallway outside the parlor when I caught it, a low, rhythmic thumping from inside. Not footsteps, more like a slow heartbeat pulsing through the air. I checked my watch, still before midnight. Rule 1 didn't apply yet. I stepped toward the parlor. The doorway was framed in dark wood, and the room beyond was barely lit by the spill of hallway light. Dust floated in the air like slow-moving snow. There was an old couch with the stuffing showing, a grandfather clock in the corner, and a large mirror leaning against the far wall, uncovered. Franklin had said all mirrors should be covered, but this one wasn't. I moved closer, my flashlight beam dancing across the warped surface. The reflection wasn't right. The room looked the same, but in the mirror the grandfather clock's pendulum was swinging. In reality, it stood still. I took a step back, pulse picking up. Then, from deep in the house, I heard it. Whitman. It was faint, like someone was speaking through layers of water. My throat tightened. Rule 2. If you hear someone whisper your name, do not respond. I held my breath. The whisper came again, closer. Whitman? I shut off my flashlight. Darkness pressed in, and my ears strained for the sound. Then something moved in the mirror. Not in the room, just in the reflection. A shape, tall and thin, sliding into view behind me. I turned. Nothing. The mirror, however, now showed that the figure was standing inches from my back. I didn't think. I grabbed the dust sheet from the couch and threw it over the mirror. The air shifted instantly, like a held breath released. When I stepped back into the hallway, Franklin was standing at the end of it, watching me with that same unreadable face. "You didn't answer it, did you?" he asked. "No." He nodded once. "Good, the last hunter did." We didn't speak again until midnight passed. The parlor's heartbeat thumping stopped exactly on the dot, like it had been shut off. I moved upstairs to check the bedrooms. The second floor smelled faintly of dust and something floral. My chest tightened as the scent grew stronger. Gardenias. Rule 5. Leave the floor immediately. I turned for the stairs, but halfway down the hall, the floral smell thickened, almost choking me. My vision swam. The hallway stretched impossibly long, the end disappearing into shadow. And in that shadow, something was moving toward me. Slow, deliberate, scraping along the walls with a sound like bone on plaster. I didn't run. Running draws attention. I backed away steadily, keeping my eyes on the shape until I reached the stairs. The moment my foot hit the first step, the hallway snapped back to its normal size. The scent vanished. Back on the first floor, Franklin was waiting again. He didn't ask what happened. "It's 3 a.m., he said. "If you want to live, you'll stay inside for the next half hour." I stayed in the kitchen, my gear on the table. At 3:12 exactly, something outside began to walk the perimeter of the house. Heavy steps, slow, deliberate. The footsteps dragged in the dirt, circling. Twice. Then they stopped outside the kitchen window. I couldn't see out. It was pitch black, but the air felt thick, like something was leaning in close, just on the other side of the glass. I didn't move. The presence lingered for what felt like forever before continuing its slow circle. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the footsteps stopped, and the night seemed to exhale again. I packed up for the night, but I knew I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Franklin had hired me for a week, and this was only the first night. Whatever lived in the lattice house wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, and it had noticed me. Morning in the lattice house did not feel like morning. The light that crept through the warped shutters was pale and thin, as though it had been strained through old water. Outside, the air was thick with humidity, and a silence that wasn't natural. No birds, no wind in the oaks, no buzzing of insects. Just stillness. Franklin was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee in a pot that looked older than I was. "You sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Some?" I lied. In truth, I'd lain awake most of the night, listening for footsteps outside my door. He slid a cup toward me. "It doesn't get easier. The first few nights, you're fresh meat. They'll test you, push at the rules, see where the seams are." "They?" I asked. Franklin looked at me then, his eyes dull but sharp at the edges. "Not everything in this house was ever human." I let that settle in. Most haunted locations I've dealt with are either tied to violent deaths or restless spirits clinging to the living. But the moment you talk about something that was never human, you step into different territory, dangerous territory. After breakfast, I checked my equipment. Overnight, one of the voice recorders had picked up faint static that pulsed in uneven intervals. When I cleaned up the audio, it almost sounded like words, but not English. The syllables were harsh, guttural, like someone was speaking from the bottom of a well. I brought it to Franklin. "That's not for you to understand," he said quietly, handing it back. "You hear that language. You cover your ears. Don't try to translate it. Not even in your head." That wasn't on the rule sheet, but I mentally added it to my list. By noon, I began a full sweep of the property. The rooms were in various stages of decay, some with furniture draped in dust sheets, others stripped bare as if someone had fled in a hurry. The second floor hallway felt longer than it had the night before. I caught myself counting my steps, just to make sure I hadn't wandered into some spatial trick. Halfway down the hall, a door on the left stood ajar. It wasn't on my map of the house. Inside was a small study, bookshelves lined with rotting ledgers, a desk under the window, and a single uncovered mirror on the far wall. The mirror's surface was murky, like it had been painted with smoke. But when I stepped closer, the glass cleared, and my reflection stared back at me. Only it didn't move when I did. I froze. My reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and lifted its hand, pressing a finger to its lips. I yanked my camera up, snapping a photo. The instant the shutter clicked, the reflection vanished, leaving only my pale, startled face staring back. I threw a dust cloth over it and backed out of the room. By late afternoon, Franklin found me in the hallway. "You stay out of that study," he said. "That's where my grandfather died. Some say he still walks in there. I don't think it's him anymore." I didn't argue. Night came fast. The moment the sun dipped, the air in the house cooled and thickened, the way it had the night before. I stayed out of the parlor. Rule 1, though I caught faint thumps from within as the clock crept toward midnight. This time, I didn't go near the doorway. Around 12:45, I was reviewing thermal footage when the smell of gardenias drifted into the room. My stomach dropped. Rule 5. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped quickly into the hall, heading for the stairs. Halfway there, the lights flickered and went out. The gardenia scent grew stronger, wrapping around me like invisible vines. From the far end of the hallway, a pale figure stepped into view. It looked like a woman. Long black hair, white nightgown swaying as though caught in a breeze I couldn't feel. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, like her neck had been bent too far. She started toward me, feet silent on the wood, but her eyes, God, her eyes were wrong. Not black, not white, just empty, as if someone had carved out the space where her soul should be. I backed toward the stairs. She moved faster. When my heel touched the first step, the smell vanished, and so did she. My heart was pounding so hard I had to sit down before my knees gave out. At 3 a.m., I returned to the kitchen, determined to observe the outside walker again. At 3:12, the steps began. This time they were heavier, dragging more. I resisted the urge to look out, but halfway through the pass, I heard something new, a low, rasping breath just outside the window. It was as if the thing was leaning against the wall, listening to me breathe in return. Then, softly, it tapped 3 times on the glass. My fingers itched to reach for the curtain. Curiosity in this line of work is as dangerous as fear. But I stayed still. When 3:33 came, the presence left. The rest of the night was quiet, until just before dawn, when I woke to the sound of faint scratching above my bed. The attic. Rule 6, never, under any circumstances, look into the attic. I stared at the ceiling, the scratching growing louder, faster, as though something was pacing just overhead. My instincts screamed to check it, but the rule was clear. Instead, I pulled my blanket over my head and lay there until the sound faded with the rising sun. When I came down for coffee, Franklin was already waiting. "They're getting bolder," he said simply. By the third night, I had stopped thinking of the Lattice house as just a job. Job's end. This place didn't feel like it was working toward an ending. It felt like it was trying to keep me. The morning after the attic scratching, I asked Franklin what was up there. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured 2 cups of coffee, set mine on the table, and stared at the steam curling from his own. "My father told me," he began slowly, "that the attic is older than the house." I frowned. "How can an attic be older than the house?" "That's the problem," Franklin said. "It wasn't built for storage. It was built to contain something. But the something outlasted the boards, the nails, even the family who put it there. The house was built around it, hoping to keep it still. But nothing stays still forever." I didn't push further. The rest of the day passed in an unnatural quiet. I reviewed footage from the previous night. Several cameras had picked up flickers of movement in empty rooms, shapes just beyond the edge of visibility. My recorder from the upstairs hallway captured a faint, rhythmic knocking. When I amplified it, the knocks formed a pattern: three short, three long, three short. It was Morse code for SOS. The problem was, I didn't know if it was a plea for help or a trap. Night fell heavy, the way it always did here, swallowing the property whole. The first hours passed uneventfully, though I avoided the parlor and kept my ears shut to anything that sounded like my name. But somewhere after midnight, a new sound reached me, faint but deliberate. Someone was walking above me. I was in the hallway, directly under the attic hatch. The footsteps were slow, dragging. A long pause between each step, as if whatever was up there was listening for my reaction. I stayed still, reminding myself of Rule 6, never, under any circumstances, look into the attic. But the thing above me didn't stop. It paced from one end to the other, then back again. And then, fingers. I could hear them, dragging along the inside of the ceiling boards, tracing the length of the hallway. I turned away, meaning to head for the stairs, when a voice came through the wood. Not a whisper this time. Help me. It was a woman's voice, thin, cracked, pleading. Everything in me tightened. My training told me never to trust a voice that comes from where no voice should be. But this sounded human. Almost too human. I clenched my fists and kept walking. The voice grew more desperate. Please, it hurts. Don't leave me here. I reached the stairs. Then it spoke again, this time right above my head, louder, sharper, and in my own voice. Whitman, look. Every instinct screamed that it was bait, that whatever was up there didn't need me to see it. It wanted me to. I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and waited. Eventually, the footsteps stopped, but I knew I hadn't passed that test alone. The rules had kept me alive again. At 3:12 a.m., the outside walker returned. This time, the steps were joined by a second set, lighter, quicker, as if something smaller was circling with it. They moved in perfect sync, one heavy, one light, dragging the same arc around the house. When they reached the kitchen side, the lighter steps broke away, darting right up to the wall beside me. The wood shuddered faintly, as though something was leaning on the other side. A slow scrape began, moving up the wall toward the window. My breath caught as a shadow fell across the curtain, not the vague blur of a tree limb, but the sharp silhouette of a hand with too many fingers. The fingers flexed once, then slid away. When 3:33 arrived, both sets of steps stopped instantly, as if they had been switched off. I should have gone to bed, but something kept me awake, an unshakable feeling that the house was changing. Not just testing me anymore, but arranging itself in preparation. Just before dawn, I heard the attic again. No footsteps this time. Just a slow, deliberate knocking against the hatch door. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. Then came the sound of something small and metallic sliding through the gap between the hatch and the ceiling. It hit the floor in front of me with a faint clink. It was a key, old, brass, and warm to the touch. I stared at it for a long time, knowing exactly what it was for. The attic had stopped waiting for me to break the rule. Now, it was trying to make me. I stood in the hallway, my breath fogging in the stagnant air. The lantern's flame wavered without wind, throwing shadows that swayed unnaturally against the peeling wallpaper. I remembered the third rule: never look into a mirror after midnight. My watch read 12:04. Somewhere deeper in the house, I heard it, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. It wasn't in a hurry. Whatever it was, it knew I'd come. I stepped forward, boots whispering on the warped floorboards. The sound grew louder, then stopped altogether. I froze. The silence was thicker than before, pressing against my ears until I could hear my own pulse. That's when I noticed the narrow door on my right. It wasn't there when I'd scouted the place earlier. Its frame was crooked, and there was no knob, just a small brass keyhole glinting in the lantern light. My fingers itched to push it open, but I didn't. The fourth rule burned in my mind: never open a door that isn't yours to open. I turned away. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, the far end swallowed in shadow. But halfway down, a mirror stood propped against the wall, its surface clouded and cracked. I told myself to keep walking. I told myself I'd already broken enough rules by just being here this late. Then the lantern flickered out. Darkness swallowed me whole. I could feel the cold creeping in, sliding over my skin like damp cloth. I fumbled for the flint, heart pounding, and then softly, almost politely, something breathed in my ear. The lantern flared back to life on its own. I was staring straight into the mirror. The reflection wasn't mine. It was close, but wrong. My eyes were too dark, my smile too wide, and behind the reflection me stood the outline of a figure draped in wet, rotting cloth. Its head hung too low, its hands far too long. I stepped back, but the reflection didn't. It stayed close to the glass, tilting its head like a curious animal. I wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. The reflection raised a hand, the long, waterlogged fingers brushing the inside of the glass. A sound like ice cracking echoed through the hall. A single fracture crept across the mirror's surface, and black water began to bead along the crack, dripping to the floor. The smell hit me then, brackish, foul, the stink of drowned things. I tore my eyes away, stumbling backward until my shoulder hit another door. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I pushed it open. Inside was the attic staircase, though I was certain I'd been on the ground floor. The boards groaned under my weight as I climbed, lantern swaying in my grip. Every step up made the air colder, denser. At the top, the attic was almost empty, except for a single trunk in the center of the floor. It was bound in rusted chains, and something inside was moving, slow, deliberate thumps like a heartbeat. The fifth rule whispered in my memory: never touch what's been chained shut. I backed away, and that's when the chains began to rattle on their own. From behind me came a low, wet voice. "You broke it." I turned. By the time the fifth night came, I wasn't sleeping at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the attic door swinging open in my dreams, a darkness inside that was thicker than the night, whispering to me in my own voice. Franklin noticed the circles under my eyes at breakfast. He didn't comment on them, just slid my coffee across the table and said, "You've lasted longer than most." "Most hunters?" I asked. He met my gaze. "Most people." That was the only thing he said all morning, but it stayed with me. The rules were doing their job, but only barely. Every night, the house was pressing harder, trying new ways to make me fail. That night, the air felt wrong even before sunset. The crickets didn't just go silent. They didn't start at all. The stillness had weight to it, pressing into my skin like damp cloth. Even my equipment seemed slower to respond, meters lagging, cameras glitching without reason. By 11:30 p.m., I was in the upstairs hallway when the scent of gardenias hit me hard. Too soon. The floral rule had only ever triggered after midnight before, but now it was creeping in earlier, bending the pattern. I moved toward the stairs, fast but steady. Halfway there, a door to my left creaked open. It was the study, the one with the mirror. The dust cloth I draped over it days ago was gone. The glass was bare, and in its surface, the study looked empty. Too empty. Even the desk and shelves were gone from the reflection. I knew better than to step inside, but the mirror seemed to swell, drawing my gaze deeper. Something was moving at the very back of the reflection, small at first, then growing larger as it came closer. When it reached the glass, I realized it wasn't walking. It was crawling. Its head was turned completely upside down, and its mouth hung open too wide, revealing teeth that were far too long. The moment it reached the edge of the reflection, the scent of gardenias vanished, and the thing smiled. "Whitman," it said in a voice that was almost mine. I turned and walked out, fast. No looking back. The house didn't like that. At 12:04, the parlor began its thumping heartbeat. I stayed in the kitchen, but the sound was louder than ever, vibrating through the walls. Then, mid-beat, it stopped, and a silence fell so sudden it made my ears ring. The next sound came from above. The attic. It was dragging something heavy across the floorboards, slow and deliberate. Then, footsteps. Not the pacing from before. This was a slow descent, as if something was coming down an unseen staircase inside the walls. I stayed in the kitchen, eyes locked on the ceiling as the sound grew closer. At 3:12, the outside walker joined in, but it didn't stay outside. The steps rounded the back of the house, stopped under the kitchen window, and then began to echo inside the walls. The air grew cold. My breath came out in faint clouds. The attic noises and the wall footsteps moved in sync now, circling me from above and around. The kitchen felt smaller with every passing second, the walls leaning in. Something scraped the floor behind me. I turned. Nothing. Then came the whisper, right against my ear. Look, it was the same word the attic had used before. I didn't move, didn't turn, didn't answer. The cold deepened until my fingers ached. My breath was ragged, but I kept my eyes on the table in front of me. At exactly 3:33, every sound stopped at once. The temperature snapped back to normal. The walls seemed to straighten. I let out a shaky breath, and that's when I saw it. On the table, where there had been nothing before, lay the brass attic key. Only now it wasn't old. It was new, shining, and wet with something dark. I didn't touch it. I just sat there, realizing the house wasn't asking anymore. It was promising. The sixth night began before the sun had even set. The house was different. Not just the air or the silence. Those were bad enough, but the shape of it felt wrong. Every hallway seemed longer, every doorway narrower. I kept finding myself standing in places I didn't remember walking to. Franklin noticed too. He didn't eat dinner, didn't speak much, just stared at the ceiling like he could hear something moving above us. When I asked if he was all right, he finally said, "It's been 6 nights. That's when it gets bold enough to open the door." "The attic door?" I asked. He didn't answer. By nightfall, I'd barricaded myself in the kitchen, every camera I had pointed toward the hallway leading to the attic hatch. I'd covered every mirror again, double-checked my gear. But part of me knew, no camera, no EMF meter, no recording device could help me tonight. At 11:47, the thumping from the parlor began, louder than ever. It was fast now, not a heartbeat, but a war drum. The walls trembled with it. Then at 11:59, it stopped mid-beat. The attic hatch creaked open. I saw it on the camera feed first, a slow, deliberate swing as if someone was pushing from the inside. My gut turned cold. The gardenia scent flooded the kitchen, thick enough to make me gag. My flashlight beam quivered as I stepped into the hall. The attic hatch was wide open. Something was hanging down from the opening. At first I thought it was rope. Then it moved, and I realized it was hair. Long, black, matted hair, swaying gently. A voice came from the darkness above. "Come and see." It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't even trying to sound human. I didn't move. The hair twitched, sliding back into the hatch. Then came the sound, something large and heavy descending, but not using stairs. It was crawling, fast, nails scraping wood. I stepped back into the kitchen, but the lights flickered and died. The darkness was thick, almost physical. A shape appeared in the hallway, tall, thin, head tilted too far to the side, limbs too long for its frame. It stood still for a moment, then took one slow, lurching step toward me. "Whitman," it said in my voice. Then Franklin's voice joined in from somewhere else in the house. "Help it. Help her. That's why you're here." The thing in the hallway moved closer, and I realized its face was a blur. Not shadow. Movement. As if dozens of other faces were trying to push through its skin. It reached the kitchen doorway, and the air turned ice cold. My breath came in ragged bursts, my vision tunneling. Rule 6 screamed in my mind. Never, under any circumstances, look into the attic. But this thing wasn't in the attic anymore. The brass key appeared on the floor between us. It slid toward me, stopping at my boots. Behind the creature, the attic hatch yawned wider, impossibly wide now, like a throat. Inside, I saw movement, shapes shifting just beyond the light, dozens of pale hands reaching out. Every instinct told me that if I took the key, I'd be pulled in. The thing stepped closer, the scent of gardenias choking me. And then, I heard it. The outside walker. Heavy, dragging steps around the house. Louder. Closer. The creature in the doorway froze. Its head turned toward the sound, jerking in unnatural angles. The walker's steps reached the wall behind me and stopped. Then came a single knock. The air shifted. The creature hissed, low and furious, and retreated backward into the dark hall. The attic hatch slammed shut so hard the ceiling shook. The lights came back. The scent vanished. Franklin appeared in the hallway, pale and sweating. "You made it," he said, almost in disbelief. "They almost had you." I stared at the attic hatch. What would have happened if I'd gone up there? His eyes dropped. "No one comes back. Not the same. Sometimes not at all." I wanted to press him, but I didn't. The rules had kept me alive for 6 nights, and tonight, something else, something outside had helped. Whether that help was a warning or just another kind of predator waiting its turn, I didn't know. At dawn, I packed my gear. Franklin didn't stop me. As I drove away, the oaks thinned, and the silence of the property finally broke. Birds sang, the air felt lighter, But in the rearview mirror, I saw the house one last time. The attic window was open, and something was watching me leave. You've been watching Dr. Snooze, and if you made it this far, maybe the rules kept you safe this time. But remember, the things I hunt don't care if the camera's off. They wait, and they follow. So, keep your lights low, keep your doors locked, and whatever you do, never break the rules. See you in the next haunt.